I don't know. This clam is, I have to do something here. Okay. This clam is a fossil, as I say, which means that it died a long time ago and its body was replaced by minerals. So this is no longer the original clam, it's actually a stone that looks like a clam because the minerals filled in where the clam was and the minerals in the waters. So this is like a piece of stone, and but it it looks exactly like a clam, and it's got all the little markings and so on. And this is about 40 million years old.
Oh,
You know, at least 40 million years old. It may be twice that. I don't know. But it's at least 40 million years old. And this was found off of Africa, near Madagascar, I think. Anyway, so these are two little creatures from the oceans. I have many more things that go back even older than these, and they no longer exist. They are extinct in many life forms. More than 90%, maybe 99% of all life forms have disappeared from the earth that were once very prevalent. So life is a kind of churning, a kind of one form replacing another over time, but it's so slow usually that we can't see this transition, or we can't see these changes. Any questions, comments? I'm going to have a little water. So all around us is a big story. All around us, so the world is full of wonders and mysteries, and we're just beginning to understand this. You know, as I mentioned, the sponge, people use sponges to bathe with for a long time, and they never really realized the significance of the sponge and how far back it began, and how it was one of the earliest, as I say, multicellular animals, which it was one of the great revolutions in life. We're sitting here because we are multicellular creatures or beings, right? We have many different kinds of cells in our bodies: blood cells, nerve cells, eye cells, stomach cells, kidney cells, bone cells, skin cells, what else? Nerve cells, brain cells, all sorts of different cells, more than 200 different kinds of cells working together to create our being, right? Um, and that goes the same for trees and plants, and although they don't probably have as many types of cells as we do, but they have multiple kinds of cells, and animals, of course, insects and birds and all that. All the plants and animals around us are multicellular. Cells of different kinds doing different jobs and cooperating together. And that's pretty amazing, I think, when you think about it. How do these cells come about, and how do they know how to cooperate together? I mean, the blood cells, for example, have to know where and when to let go of oxygen in the body, How does it know how to do that? Um, Nerve cells communicate with each other. If you touch a stove or something, or you even walk on the floor, your body is the nerves in your feet are telling your body where you are in space, right? How does it do that? Just sitting in a chair, the body knows where it is in space. Your arms, your chest, your head, everything has a certain orientation, and it's not an accident that it knows how to position itself. So we're just learning about all of this. We're just learning about the vastness of the universe and how rich and amazing is our being, our lives. Isn't that interesting that we can now learn all these things that were hidden for thousands and thousands of years. Here's a book by Teilhard de Chardin. Who's that? Teilhard de Chardin. He was a priest, a Jesuit priest, lived in France, and became a scientist. And he made some major discoveries in um, the 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 um, the early humans that occupied the planet. He went to China, and he found the remains, the fossils, like this clam is this fossil clam. He found the fossil bones of humans that were not like us. They were earlier versions of humans. The Java Man, they called one of these uh, discoveries, and these people lived before our present human beings. So there was quite a number of different ancestors that led to modern humans. And Teilhard de Chardin was one of the people who made major discoveries. And, he tried to blend science and spirituality, science and religion. And it was difficult because the church wouldn't let him publish a lot of the times. And he had a hard time making his case with the church. And it's unfortunate. Today, it's all accepted. And, things like evolution is something the Pope accepts, and global warming, the Pope accepts. And, so we're living in a different time. But of hundreds of years ago, if you said the wrong thing, you got in even worse trouble than not being published. Um, so, in the church. Anyway, Teilhard de Chardin. I want to read a little bit of something here. Um, For our fathers, the world was so clearly and indefinitely flat surface that it took them centuries of reflection and dangerous voyages to break the spell of appearances and make the mental circuit of the globe. Today, a new effort to improve our perspectives is just coming to a head. Having made the circuit of our universe, we are just beginning to decipher its features. Patiently assembled, the innumerable details gathered about the Earth's surface are beginning to fit together. They are gaining meaning for our eyes. So that's a beautiful passage and an idea that we gain, as we learn, we gain different perspectives, which is why it is so important to learn, to take in new things. And by doing that, we gain a new vision, a new understanding. The earth is not the center of the universe as we once thought. The earth is not sitting there stable, unmoving, stationary, with the sun moving around it and all the planets and stars moving around it. The earth, we now know, moves through space like the other planets and moves about the sun. The sun, the vast sun, is at the center of our solar system, and we are a little traveler, a wanderer around our vast sun. And that's we take it for granted that we know this today, but that was a hard-won understanding 500 years ago. No one believed that. No one believed the earth moved. There are probably people today who don't believe it. But we know the earth moves, which is why we have day and night, right? Why we have winter and summer, spring and fall. Any questions? So, learning is very important, and we learn from books, we learn from TV, we learn. How do we learn? Um, how do we learn? How is you're sitting in a class now, right? Hopefully there's something to learn. Um, and there are different ways of learning, right? You can read a magazine or a book. You can turn on the TV or even a computer today, and you can learn wonderful things. I'm going to have a little tea. This tea came from India. So, any questions? So, a life of learning. A life of learning is something many people gravitate towards. It's important not just not just to live ordinarily, but to expand our vision, expand our understanding. And it's endless, isn't it? It's endless. We can't ever come to the bottom of it. Now, there was a great scientist who lived um, a few years ago. His name was Richard Feynman. Richard Feynman was one of the most um, inventive physicists, and he invented a whole way of thinking about atoms and picturing atoms that made it much clearer for people to understand how atoms group together and so on. And he was very, very well respected, and often people asked his opinions about things. And one day somebody asked him, "Do you think we'll ever finish learning? Do you think we'll ever find out all the mysteries of the universe and how things work and so on. And he said, well, I guess that's possible, but it may also be possible that it has no bottom. That learning about the universe is infinite, and we may never fully understand all that is before us. One reason we may never understand that is because things are always changing, evolving. So we don't know what things are going to be like in 10,000 years, for example, right? Or 100,000 years, or 1,000,000 years. The universe works in time frames that are not like human time frames. So the future of the universe is difficult to predict. What humans will become in the future is difficult to predict. We think we're always going to be here the same, but it's probably not the case, because life has always evolved, which means life has always changed over time. And now human beings can even manipulate life to change it over time. We're learning how to go into the code of life, the DNA, and manipulate or change that so we can produce different forms, different humans perhaps that are stronger or smarter or more artistic perhaps, or better at I don't know, drawing, or who knows. But we can now change the DNA of all life, and that's huge. And it's just beginning. People are just beginning to understand what that means, and it's a little bit frightening for some people who say you shouldn't manipulate life and you should just let it go on as it always has. That maybe we're messing around with something we shouldn't, but that's a different question. Um, any question? All right, let's see. There was another interesting. This Sponge article was in Scientific American, which is one of the oldest scientific magazines in America, from the 1800s. It began, and this is an interesting magazine because it is written for ordinary folks to read about science, and it is written in ordinary language so that we can understand what is going on in science. I have some other magazines which, here is a magazine, Science, which is one of the premier magazines for scientists in the world, but it is written for scientists, basically, not the general public. And you have articles that are incomprehensible in here to most people, including myself. But there are a few articles written in ordinary English which you can understand, rather than scientific jargon. Anyway, it's a very good magazine, but it is not for the general public. And I just kind of, do the best I can with it, as I'm not a formal scientist, but I'm someone who is interested in science. And that means, that we can all be interested in science. We don't have to be scientists to appreciate science. So I think that's a wonderful thing. Let's see what we have here. This is a beautiful book called News of the Universe. News of the Universe. And this is a compilation of poems by Robert Bly. If you've heard of Robert Bly, maybe. And he has this book of poems that are written by many different people in from different times. Here's a poem called Sunflower by Rolf Jacobson. When sower walked over earth, which hands sowed our inner seeds of fire? They went out from his fists like rainbows to frozen earth, young loam, hot sand. They will sleep there greedily and drink up our lives and explode into pieces for the sake of a sunflower that you haven't seen, or a thistlehead, or a chrysanthemum. When sower walked over earth, which hands sowed our inner seeds of fire? Who is the sower he is talking about? And what seeds of fire is the sower spreading over the earth? Very mysterious. I don't know. Do you know? Seeds are a great mystery. Seeds are a revolution in life. A time when life created something that could enable a plant to live in a place and wait for a time when the rains would come, and then it would grow and it would have some food to make sure that it would grow in the right way. The food is in the seed. The food is contained in the seed. It surrounds the young plant that's in the seed. And this arrangement enabled seeds and plants to go about the world, to explore and develop in new places. Revolution. There are many revolutions in life that we're just beginning to understand how life changed over time, how there were no seeded plants early on, and that life and plants had to live around water all the time. It had to live in a place of lots of water because otherwise it would dry out, and it couldn't disperse its seeds very far because the seeds weren't like seeds of today. They were just little bits of genetic information. They had no food. They had no way to prosper. When the rains finally came, maybe it would work, maybe it didn't. But when the seed was invented, the world changed. And Fortunately for us, we like seeds not only because they produce different plants, but they give us much of our food. The bread on our table is made of what? Is made of seeds, right? Wheat seeds, or rye seeds, or what else? Sorghum, or corn, perhaps. Tortillas are made of corn, and corn is basically a seed. So is the wheat that we grind into our bread. And this is pretty amazing, right? Um, this was a big development in the history of life, the creation of seeds. Hundreds of millions of years ago. The flowering plants came only about 140 million years ago. Most of the plants and trees we see around us today are flowering plants or trees. And the grasses, for example, or even an oak tree, or a palm, or a watermelon, or a peach, or what else? Wheat and rye and things like that, and cauliflower and asparagus, and all the things that we eat and practically are all from flowering plants. And flowering plants was a revolution. About 140 million years ago, the first tiny flowering plant appeared. Before then, you only had things like ferns and pines and things like that. Um, and The flowering plants exploded across the world and became the many, many varieties that we see today about us. Most of the world's plants and trees are flowering. And how did that happen? How did that ever come about? Life has a great potential to it. Life began, we think, as a single cell, as something like a bacteria that was invisible to the naked eye, so tiny you couldn't see it, but there nonetheless, and thriving in the earth for a long time, thriving on the earth, I should say. And these bacteria eventually changed into a new type of cell, which led to the world we see today. It was possibly one of the greatest revolutions in living forms and living beings, that bacteria could become some new type of living thing, a new type of cell that led to animals and plants that you could actually see. Pretty amazing. How did that happen? How did plants, for example, long ago, before they were plants, when they were just bacteria, how did they figure out a way of taking the sunlight and air and water and making sugar out of that? It's a very complex process, very detailed. You have to have very specific structures, and it has to work because the sunlight works in a certain way, and the air works in a certain way, and the water also works in a certain way. And if atoms and molecules and the light weren't in a certain way, nothing would work. What is this world? What is life? How is this possible? We have oxygen in the air to breathe, for example. Oxygen is very powerful at pulling other particles of energy towards itself. And that's how it works in our cells to create a kind of electrical current that enables us to create energy. Ultimately, it's very complicated. But how is that possible? I mean, why should oxygen have this quality? Why does carbon is another element like it's another atom like oxygen, carbon, it's all around us, it's in the air, it's in the pencil leads that we have. It's made diamonds are made of carbon. So carbon can take on different shapes and forms, but one of the important things about carbon is that it forms chains of atoms. It forms certain patterns of atoms that enable things like sugars and starches and proteins to exist. And there's no other atom, well, there is one other atom, silicon, that could do it, but for some reason nature doesn't use silicon to do this. So we're not made of sand. Nature makes some particular decisions, like there are many, many different kinds of what we call amino acids, which make the proteins of our body, and there are maybe a few hundred different kinds of those, but nature only uses about 20. Why those particular 20? So nature is very specific in the way it works. It's mind-boggling. Questions or comments? Is this interesting? Well, no. um, the world is full of great wonder, truly great wonder. Um, and the difficulty is it's hard to see it. It's hard to grasp it. And so we go about our daily lives without, I think, really appreciating enough that we are just here, that being just here is a kind of wonder in itself. That we can, sit in a chair and think and perceive, and we can see and we can hear and touch and feel, and it's really far more than we can understand. But if we try to understand, we may be able to enhance our lives. We may be able to appreciate our lives in a better way. So that's why I'm glad we're all together today. It's not just for you, it's for me too. And whoops, I just somehow I lost you guys. Oh, Get up here. Okay, we're back. All right, another mystery. These computers are finicky. I always wonder if it's gonna work. But anyway, any questions or stories you want to tell? Anyone ever have a baby out here? Male or female? I mean, of course, if you're male, you know have a baby, but you watch a baby grow. That's pretty amazing. How does a baby begin as a single cell, one cell, which it's invisible, right? One cell becomes two cells, and then four, and then eight, and finally about 30 trillion cells becomes a human being, or a tree, or a frog, and that's pretty amazing, right? I have a grandchild. I'm watching this grandchild grow. It's pretty interesting. Anybody have grandchildren out there? You have grandchildren, anyone? No? Um, all right, I think I'm going to read another poem. Or I shall read an excerpt from Mary Oliver's book of essays called Upstream. Mary Oliver, of course, was a poet, but she also wrote regular stories. Let's see what we got here. She's writing, let's see. Let's see. Here's a piece. There is a rumor of total welcome among the frosts of the winter morning. Beauty has its purposes, which all our lives and at every season is an opportunity and a joy. Nothing outside ourselves makes us desire to do so. The questions and the striving towards answers come from within. The field I am looking at is perhaps 20 acres altogether, long and broad. The sun has not yet risen, but is sending its first showers over the mountains. A kind of rehearsal, a slant light with even a golden cast. I do not exaggerate. The light touches every blade of frozen grass, and then burns as a particular as well as part of the general view. The still upright weeds have become wands encased in a temporary shirt of ice and light. Neither does this first light miss the opportunity of the small pond or the groups of pine trees. And now, enough of silver. Behold the pink, even a vague, unsurpassable flush of pale green. It is the performance of this hour only, the dawning of the day, fresh, and ever new. Each day dawns fresh and ever new. Each moment is a creation. Each moment the world's atoms and molecules are spinning, are weaving the world together. Each moment we are born again, brought into being, into existence, merging with the light and the air and the water and the ground under our feet, the food on our table. Each moment is a kind of miracle. Any questions or comments? Here's an interesting book called Merton's Palace of Nowhere. Merton is Thomas Merton, a monk who this book is about. Thomas Merton was a Catholic monk who lived in Kentucky in a monastery, and he wrote many wonderful books, and he studied all sorts of things, Eastern religion, for example, different languages. He was very much interested in creating peace in the world, in turning people away from war and injustice, and so he was highly revered, not just in the church but in the peace movements and in um, multi-religious circles. He often was entertained by Buddhists as well as people in India, Hindus. So this book is a wonderful book. It's been published for years and years, and this is the 25th edition. And so, what is Thomas Merton write about? He writes about the beauty of God in the world, the beauty of the spirit that is before us, that is um, in the actual existence of the world. Beauty of sunlight on a tall vase of red and white carnations, and green leaves on the altar in the novitiate chapel. The light and dark, the darkness of the fresh crinkled flower, light, warm and red all around us, all around the darkness. The flower is the same color as blood, but it is in no sense whatever as red as blood, not at all. It is red as a carnation, only that. The flower, this light, this moment, this silence, Dominus est, eternity. He passes, he remains. We pass in and out, we remain. He remains. We are nothing, we are everything. He is in us, He is gone from us. He is not here. We are here in him. So I think I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you for being in class today. Thank you for your deep listening. It's been a pleasure to be with you. I hope to see you again next week, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
So be well.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Take care. Thank you all. It's always good to see you.
Bye-bye. Siéntate aquí. Siéntate aquí, por favor. Hold on. Hold on. Siéntate aquí, por favor. Hold on 1 second. Yeah, I don't want you to fall. What? I don't want you to fall. Yeah, that's all. I don't want to fall either. All right.